Okay, we're going to go ahead and call to order the East Consolidated Zoning Board for this evening. Can we do a roll call, please?
Yes. Ken Sanderson is absent. Scott Ballantyne.
Here.
Fred Wingert.
Here.
Rod Richardson.
Here.
And Ken Klingsmith.
Here.
Thank
and
you.
If you could, for us, read the statement for hybrid, in-person, and virtual meeting, please.
Yes. This meeting is now being recorded in the board hearing room with zoning board members attending in person. There is also an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. For Zoom participants wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app at the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. Comments will be received from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. When it is your turn to speak, the moderator will recognize you by the name or phone number used to join the Zoom webinar, and your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and the city and state where you reside for the record, followed by your comments. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-9666. Board members, staff, and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking, and please speak into the microphone so your comments can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As it relates to adding or revising the agenda, we are going to review application number E25536 prior to application E25530, just from a scheduling perspective. Any other changes or revisions? And if not, can we approve the agenda and have a motion to approve the agenda with that change?
So moved.
All in favor, or second?
Fred Wingert, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Any disclosures of conflict of interest or external contacts related to the two applications listed for this evening? Hearing none, can we get approval to approve the January 7th board meeting minute packet that's enclosed?
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, so moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we'll go ahead and move to the Board of County Commissioners and Planning Committee actions. Sean? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the zoning board, Sean Penley, county planning staff. For Board of County Commissioners actions, there were 3 applications at the last meeting of the January East Consolidated Zoning Board that will be coming up for Board of County Commissioners. I'll just go through those really quickly. There's a rezoning and preliminary plat for Wilshire Estates. The final plat application that's on this evening's agenda, that rezoning and preliminary plat was recommended for approval. There was a preliminary and final plat for 199th and Schweitzer Road and a conditional use permit for Wolf Creek Golf Course Business Retreat. If you recall, the zoning board recommended approval of those applications at the last meeting in January. They're scheduled for action, final action with the Board of County Commissioners on February 12th here in the board hearing room next Thursday. Another update for Board of County Commissioners. There is a public hearing scheduled for next Thursday, February 12th, regarding the zoning board consolidation, as we discussed last year, at the end of last year. And then also we had a committee of the whole meeting with the board. Just to update you on that, at that committee of the whole meeting, staff did provide a presentation and also reiterated some of the comments from the zoning, both the East Zoning Board and the West Zoning Board, presented those to the Board of County Commissioners. Following that presentation, the board did recommend staff to move forward with scheduling a public hearing for the consolidation. So that is scheduled for next Thursday, February 12th. We, in that resolution that we've prepared for the board's consideration, we're recommending an effective date, if it's approved, if the resolution is approved by the board next week, we're recommending an effective date for May 1st for the new consolidated zoning board. So this board will still remain, and both the zoning boards will remain in effect for the next 2 months. So we expect the last regularly scheduled meeting of the East Zoning Board to be on April 1st. There is a regularly scheduled meeting, and we do have applications scheduled for that meeting. So we'll provide more updates following that, but I can answer any questions. And then the last update for Planning Commission actions, we did have a Planning Commission meeting on January 27th, and we had a public hearing for the proposed short-term rental regulations. We presented those to the draft regulations to the Planning Commission and held a public hearing. There were a couple of public speakers for that. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of those new short-term rental regulations by a vote of 6-2. That will move forward now for final action at the Board of County Commissioners on February 26th. That concludes the board reports. Happy to answer any questions.
The resolution that's being presented on the consolidation of the zoning boards, has that been published out on the internet yet for the meeting?
Yes, that has been published on the board agenda, and that is available online right now.
Okay, thank you. And that meeting is Thursday?
That meeting is next Thursday, February 12th. And yes, all those, the resolution and briefing sheet with a summary is included on the BOCC packet online.
And the short-term rentals out there as well for that too, or is that a separate agenda item?
That draft is not yet on the board,
Agenda.
not on the board agenda yet, but it will be posted next week. Or well, it'll be submitted next week and then it gets posted the following week. However, the draft regulations are on the Planning Commission page, on our Planning Commission page. We did post all of that on the Planning Commission page, so that's available online on our Planning Commission page.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward to the business before the board. Consistent with our revised agenda, we'll go ahead and hear application number E25536FPAU. It's the final plat for 5100 West 207th Street. Thank you, Michelle.
Good evening, Michelle Leininger, County Planning Staff. This is a request for a final plat for Wilshire Estates. This is an aerial of the subject property shown in blue, which is located east of Null Avenue and north of 207th Street. The property is approximately 53 acres and zoned RUR with the pending PRLD. Property is currently developed with single-family home, 3 accessory buildings, and 3 different pond areas. The preliminary plat and rezoning were before the zoning board at their January 7th meeting, where the board recommended approval of both items. The Board of County Commissioners will take actions on those at their February 12th meeting. So here is the final plat. It is consistent with what the board saw last month with the preliminary. So it is 14 lots, approximately 3 acres, 5 tracks, and a new street with 2 cul-de-sacs and future connection to the east. On this map, north is to your left. The minimum infrastructure requirements and plat requirements are met with the stipulations on the preliminary plat and the proposed stipulations on the final plat. Staff does recommend approval of the final plat for a 14-lot residential subdivision to be known as Wilshire Estates, subject to the stipulations outlined in the staff report. And here's our recommended motion. And I can answer any questions, and the applicant is also here.
If I understand, if I understand correctly, this has not been, the preliminary has not been approved by the county commissioners yet, is that correct?
That is correct. There's a stipulation that is included with this final plat, that those have to be approved before the recording of the final plat.
Will this go with, if we make a motion to approve this, will that go with the preliminary plat and be done at once, or will it actually be 2 separate meetings that would have to go to?
It will go actually a month later.
Okay. Any questions of staff? And to confirm, nothing's changed from the preliminary plat, as I understand, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Hearing none, I don't know if the applicant would like to have any words or comments?
I have no comments unless you have questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Hearing none, go ahead, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mr. Phelps, this is a question that I have on both of these applications. I'll ask you, I may end up asking you twice, but obviously we're seeing more subdivisions developed in the township area and of our area, and this will be issue for the next zoning board when it's consolidated, if it is. And these subdivisions are all large lot, pretty much very nice, large homes, et cetera, and they're on septic tanks. So how do you perceive this impacting the delivery of sanitary sewers out there? Is that a concern for you? And I'm not asking for your applicant. I don't have any issues with this plan, but I'm just asking for the benefit of general information and your experience as a longtime engineer in the area. If you see just the proliferation of these large lot subdivisions out there rather than a more sequenced extension of sewers and then development.
Yeah, so I'll give you my perspective on it, which is all I can do. But I can tell you, I've had some conversations with Spring Hill and Overland Park. There are areas such as Stillwell that it's not going to make sense to extend sewers 3 miles to serve Stillwell because there's not enough land left to do that. May it have some impact on lift stations, and Johnson County Wastewater kind of having to do some lift stations. It may also come down to some low-pressure sewer, may we see more low-pressure sewers than we're seeing now. So it kind of depends on the watershed. There's a number of watersheds still, that's part of the problem on the south side of Wolf Creek, is they are fairly small watersheds, so you have to run a line up each one of those watersheds. There's significant area between 69 Highway and, say, Flum, that still has significant areas that could be developed and sewers extended to those areas. In fact, I'd say probably all the way over to, between 69 and 169 for those areas. And the sewer is in Wolf Creek. What I think, again, in my opinion, we made changes 30 years ago from benefit districts to contract districts, simply because benefit districts had kind of served their purpose. Well, the contract districts kind of have now. So we have to come up with a different mechanism in order to extend the sewers. If you extend the sewers down there, the cities are going to annex and people are going to annex and connect. It's just without the sewers and limited ground in the cities right now to develop, we're seeing quite a bit of development in the rural part.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question, because I think, at least I can only speak for myself, but in looking at these and reading about questions of development out there and having lived out there for 37 years and seeing what's developing, you keep thinking, well, maybe some of this development is sort of jumping the gun and should wait for sewers, but then I see the sewer district saying, yeah, it might be another 10 or 15 years before you get out there. So I've kind of concluded that waiting for sewers is probably not the right game, in which case I think what we're going to see is more and more of these large lot subdivisions. And of course, if we get so many of those, it is going to be harder to extend sewers. So I don't know how you fix that problem, but.
Yeah, you've got to get the cities on board.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And then they have to have a mechanism by which you connect to the sewers to force the connection and extension
Right.
On down the road.
Right, which is not inexpensive, needless to say. All right, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Just to confirm, Ken has not joined us online, right? Okay, perfect. Anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Seeing no one in the audience, confirming no one's on Zoom. We'll go ahead and close the open and close the public opinion comments. Any final thoughts among the board?
Mr. Chairman, I see no reason to not proceed to approve this. So I'll move that we approve application number E25-536-FP for a final plat for a 14-lot residential subdivision to be known as Wilshire Estate, subject to the stipulations outlined in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and will be heard at the Board of County Commissioners on,
Michelle Langer, this is going before the Board of County Commissioners at their March 12th meeting, which is held here in this room beginning at 9:30 a.m.
perfect, thank you. Next on business before the board is application number E25530REZ and 25531PP and 25532 DP for the rezoning, the preliminary plat, and the preliminary development plan for 15710 West 183rd Street. Diane?
Good evening. Diane Wicklund, Planning Department. I think I have that mic okay, I guess. Diane Wicklund, Planning Department. Just a quick note, we did set a handout at your each desk spot there. It's for a new proposed stipulation. I'll talk about that later, but just wanted to point that out now for you. So for this application, the applicant is Kimley Horn and Associates. The landowners is the Den at Wolf Creek LLC. The general location is at the northwest corner of 183rd Street and Lackman Road, as you can see here on the vicinity map. The existing land use is residential, and the current zoning is the rural zoning district. There are 3 existing residences and accessory buildings on site. The total acreage is 156 acres, and that does include 2 separate parcels. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the 156 acres from the rural zoning district to the planned rural zoning district, and a preliminary plat serving as the preliminary development plan for the purpose of creating a 13-lot residential subdivision to be known as the Den at Wolf Creek. The lots on the preliminary plat range from 4 acres to about 10 acres. And the preliminary plat does show the 3 additional tracts to be designated for streets and open space. The existing lake on site, as you can see here on the aerial, will remain and will be modified to also be utilized for the detention basin. The subject property does have 3 existing residences. Two of the 3 of those homes will be removed or demolished prior to recording the final plat. I believe maybe they have already been demolished. And the 3rd house will remain, which will be located on proposed lot 12 until its lease has expired. Also, that residence can remain on the property per the zoning regulations because it is located on the lot where it does meet current setback requirements. The proposed subdivision also has 2 new local subdivision streets that will be constructed by the developer. There's also a landscape plan here that I'll show in a minute, showing landscaping and buffers and berms along the frontage of 183rd Street and Lackman Road. In addition, the plan also shows a walking trail around the lake for the residents and amenities and living in the subdivision. And the developer also has some plans for monument signs located at the 2 street entrances. And there will also be a homeowners association which will be responsible for maintenance of the landscape areas, the lake and open space areas, and the private streets. So this is just an aerial view of the adjacent area. The property is outlined in blue, and you can just kind of see the larger lots in the area. And then I'll talk about this a little bit. This is just the zoning map. Subject properties outlined in blue. You can see the surrounding rural zoning and kind of complementing those larger lot sizes. Here's a copy of the preliminary plat showing those 2 cul-de-sac streets and the lake walking trail. And then here's the landscape plan. So in terms of review of the infrastructure requirements, The application does meet all the required infrastructure requirements for that PRUR zoning district. Again, as I stated, there's those two new public streets that will be built by the developer. A traffic memo was also submitted by the applicant, and it has been reviewed and accepted by the Public Works Department. In regard to the preliminary stormwater and management plan, the applicant did submit a preliminary stormwater study, and it was reviewed by the Public Works Department. So there is some additional information and revisions that will be required for that preliminary stormwater plan. And so submittal and approval of that revised stormwater report will be required at the time of the final plat application. And so the stormwater management floodplain compliance, will further be evaluated by staff at the time of final plat application and that submittal of that final stormwater study. There's also a stipulation to that effect. So I wanted to take a quick minute to kind of give an update on, the information in the staff report for wastewater treatment and how that will be handled. So all that information is still up to date, but we have had some further conversations with JCW, Johnson County Wastewater District, and so I want to just update some information on that. So in terms of the minimum infrastructure requirements, so the proposed platted area is to be designated as that planned rural zoning district, and therefore it's subject to the category wastewater requirement in the regulations. And so the proposed lots are located within that urban fringe policy area, and I'll talk a little bit about that later too. And it also has lots that are smaller than 7 acres, and so therefore kind of a combination of both of those criteria that the proposed plat is subject to that dry sewer policy. And so furthermore, Johnson County Wastewater does consider it likely and reasonable to expect that sanitary sewers would be available in this area within a 15-year time period. Therefore, those dry sewers are required. However, so Johnson County Wastewater and the Planning Department we're working with the developer, having some conversations with them. We'll continue to have conversations with them and their engineer on this requirement and to flesh out the details of what that looks like in terms of the requirements. And so that will be addressed at the final plat application stage. So for now, staff will be recommending the following stipulation. I'm just going to read this into the record so that you don't have to read it if and when we would get to a motion. But so based on those kind of conversations so far, we would recommend adding this following stipulation, which would read, according to Johnson County Wastewater District, sanitary sewer service is considered likely to be available for the subject property within the next 15 years. Per Article 31 of the Zoning and Subdivision Regulations, the preliminary plat is subject to dry sewer policy, which requires dry low pressure sewers or gravity sewers to be provided by the developer unless a waiver is granted by the Board of County Commissioners in accordance with the regulations. The details for sewer service and required drainage easements shall be determined at the time of the final plat review and approval. So I just wanted to kind of share that update with the board. And so I'll just kind of continue on here, have a few more comments. Water One will be providing water to the site and fire flow requirements for building and fire codes will be required and provided. And again, as I stated earlier, this application does meet all the relevant minimum infrastructure requirements, given the stipulations that are recommended for approval. We did do a golden analysis review. You can see in the staff report because of the rezoning and the preliminary plat. I'm not really going to go through that, but just to say that the proposed PRUR zoning and the preliminary plat is consistent with the surrounding rural zoning and residential and agricultural uses of the nearby properties, and will continue to be consistent and compatible with that existing and surrounding the zoning and land uses and those large parcel sizes that I showed you earlier. And so staff feels like it does meet the golden criteria for that. Also to know, in terms of the rural comprehensive plan, as I stated earlier, it is in that urban fringe policy area, which calls for close coordination with the closest nearby city. And in this case, that is City of Overland Park, which is city limits, is just across the street on the east side of Lackman Road. So City of Overland Park did receive notice of this application. However, we received no comments from the city on that. And so the proposed rezoning and preliminary plat does comply with minimum infrastructure and requirements, zoning subdivision regulations, and therefore is in keeping with the rural comprehensive plan. Therefore, planning staff is recommending approval of the rezoning to PRUR and the preliminary plat for that 13-lot subdivision with the stipulations that are shown on pages 13, 14, and 15 of the staff report, with a couple of recommended revisions by staff. The first one is to delete stipulation number 20, which talks about showing stream buffer zones on the property and adding a plat note. That has been completed, so we just recommend going ahead and deleting stipulation number 20, and then also adding that stipulation that I just read into the record regarding the dry sewers. And then again, the reasons for approval of the rezoning and plat are listed on page 16. I think at this point I can stop, and if I can answer any questions that the zoning board might have.
Thank you, appreciate that. Quick question I just had, what is the, can you comment on the easement that's going to be vacated, which is that little area at the bottom? Is that utilities, or what is the easement at the? It's the little square that kind of creeps in right by the lake.
Right here?
Yes.
Oh, so that is the second, that's the second parcel. So I'm going to go back here to an aerial. So this plat comprises two parcels. The very large parcel here where my arrow is, okay, and also this 1 acre piece that has a single family home on it. Those are actually two separate parcels, but both are incorporated into this preliminary plat. So when you look at the preliminary plat drawing, you can see, so it's just a note saying, when this preliminary or the final plat would be recorded, that 1 acre piece is going to go away. And, will be part of, that part of lot 13, but it's definitely incorporated into this plat. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mistakenly was thinking east and west of the pond on that, so thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Any questions of staff?
Fred Wingert, I had a question on the preservation of the public open space. We had that on the last one and we had it on this one. Is that a requirement or is that something the developer offers to do? And then I had a couple more questions about it.
Diane McClellan, Planning Department. No, it is not a requirement of the zoning or subdivision regulations. Rather, it's what the developer is proposing. And, staff is fine with that. We're always supportive of retaining existing trees and landscaping. And so that's just something that the developer is proposing, and we're fine with that.
And so is that now part of the park system? Is that are they deeding that area over to the park system? Is that what they're doing?
No. So all of the new berming, the landscape plan, the trees, the preservation of existing trees that you see on here, all of that will be owned by the homeowners association, and they'll maintain that. No, there would be no land here that I'm aware of that would be transferred to Johnson County Parks and Rec.
If Sean Penley, County Planning Staff, I'll add on to this just in case I make sure we're answering Mr. Wingert's question completely. Are you also asking about this because of the stipulation regarding the development plan and the fee in lieu of open space? That stipulation, is that part of your question?
Was a fee on the last one and there's a fee on this one. And
Yeah,
last
yeah.
one was like 90
So
some thousand.
that's a different requirement, yeah.
Okay.
So this, so the developer does have the option to either dedicate public parkland as part of a plat. In lieu of that, they can pay the development, this fee, that's a requirement of the dedication of public open space. In lieu of that, they can pay this fee that's based on the assessed valuation of the property. And that's what this applicant is doing with this project. So they both have private open space that they have as part of the HOA, their private open space, but also because they're not dedicating that public parkland with this plat, they would be subject to that development fee, and that'll be applied at the time of final plat. That is a requirement of the county.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That's good. Good clarification.
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, my question goes back to the sewers. And I just want to make sure I understand this, because this has been an issue that's come up since I got involved in these zoning boards clear back to 1991, I think. But this stipulation, number 22, says that for Article 31, it's subject to the dry sewer policy, which requires dry, low-pressure sewers or gravity sewers to be provided by the developer unless a waiver is granted. So let's assume there's no waiver. And I know that's just a hypothetical question, but if there's no waiver, is the developer then just installing the main sewer lines that the individual lots could connect up to at some point if those sewers ever go live?
So I don't think those details have been worked out yet, but I think that's the general concept for those dry sewers, is that they're, installed at the time of other infrastructure construction, at the time of planning and creating the subdivision. And then so those dry sewers are installed at that point. And then, yes, then whenever sewers actually come to the property, then they hook up and become wet or live at that point. With this stipulation that I was speaking of, we have not determined the exact requirements for the dry sewer yet. So we still need to have additional conversations with planning, JCW, and the developer and the engineer to work out those details. And we would, those at that time of final plat, we would have those details worked out and can share those at the time when they come back for final plat.
Okay. And again, my question, I realize that's in process, so. But I'm trying to understand if the purpose of this particular Article 31 is that we might get sewers sometime within the next 15 years. Therefore, we want you to go ahead and put in the necessary infrastructure that would allow people to connect to these. But the question that I have is, and I've had, because of just the way things work, that I have vivid memories of requiring, as a member of this board, when it was just the Aubrey Township Zoning Board, that developers put in dry sewer systems, et cetera, with the advent of sewers coming within the next 15 years. And it's been, how long has it been? Since the 1990s, there's still no sewers. And it makes me wonder how much logic there really is in requiring a developer. And then the easements for those sewers obviously would be important, but putting in significant infrastructure, which may or may not meet the code's requirements or anything else of the sewer district 15 years out. And I mean, that's really an argument the developer, that's an issue. It may not be important to them at all, but it does kind of call to question the logic of doing much more than doing the easements if there's no indication these sewer districts are going to be extended for maybe up to 15 years, and acknowledging the history that the extension of sewer districts out into this part of the county have been far less aggressive than was originally thought. And I guess I only say it in the sense that if that dry sewer is there, if it's not appropriate, the sewer district suddenly extended, who pays for changing out the now 20, 30-year-old sewer that may no longer meet requirements, or there's been settlement, or it's, whatever. So those are things that I think whoever's discussing this would probably be discussing the impact of that.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think when we had our conversations today with JCW, I think those were the very questions and details that we'll need to work out. Sean?
Thanks for that, adding that, Diane. And to answer Ms. Richards' questions, those are exactly the questions we had as well. And the applicant, of course, is very concerned, but JCW did indicate they also recognize that issue of timing, exact timing of whether or not, when the sewers, they know it's very likely this sewer district will be enlarged. It looks like it's going to be very soon because they are running new sanitary sewer within a mile of the site, and they do have plans in this area. The question is when, and the details for who constructs what and when and how. That's exactly what we talked about with JCW, as Diane mentioned. So we're working through those details, and we also let the applicant know as well, so that we need to have that discussion prior to the final plat coming before the zoning board and BOCC, and those details can be worked out. At a minimum, JCW agreed, we need to make sure that there's provisions for the proper drainage easements to accommodate that, whether it be dry sewers or sanitary sewers, and the applicant is agreeable to that. So we'll work out those details with the final plat. But then you're right, also, we have to stipulate this because it is a requirement of our regulations unless a waiver is granted. So we have to give those two options, and then the zoning board and BOCC will have to consider that and make the final decision. And then, but yeah, this is great points. That's why we said at a minimum, we need to include the requirement and let the applicant know that this is something that will have to be addressed at the time of final plat.
Okay, thank you for that. Very instructive. Let me ask just one more question. If theoretically you put these dry sewers in, there's an easement, the developer grants an easement to the sewer district, and these dry sewers are put in, but nothing happens for 15 years, let's say, just theoretically. And during that time, there's been settlement, the contractor didn't put them in right, and part of it goes uphill and part of it, it just it isn't working. Was that dry sewer line dedicated to the Johns County wastewater, so it's their problem, not falling back on the residents or their HOA? I mean, if I'm gonna give them the easement and I put the dry sewers in there, who owns those dry sewers and who's responsible for that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think the way we'll confirm with JCW before the next, before the final plat, and we'll have this discussion, but I believe they enter into a contract or a development agreement with the developer to determine what gets installed, whose maintenance responsibility, and how any new lines need to be upgraded, changed. That's all is handled through an agreement with JCW at the time of installation.
Right, okay, because if I were just Joe developer, I'd be saying, well, if I'm going to put these in, and it might be 15 years before you've got anything out here theoretically, although this one sounds like much sooner, I'd be thinking, once I put these in and dedicate it to you, it's on you and not me. Because that would give, if things didn't work out, and it was a long time, it would certainly give the homeowners out there a little satisfaction, because if I were buying a house out there, I'd be thinking, well, if the sewer's coming and it's not going to get here for 10 years and there's a problem with that sewer, I don't want to get hit with an assessment, so that's on me. I think that ought to be, really on Johns County wastewater. But I defer to your say, but that's all going to be discussed. But when it comes back be most interested to see how that question's answered, because I'm asking this really from the future homeowner of one of those lots. How do they think about that and the potential cost? Because it isn't cheap to do all these sewer extensions, obviously. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That's all I got.
Questions, and we'll definitely plan to have a representative from JCW here, when we do the final plat, and I'm certain they can answer those questions way better than I.
Right, and I think that this will come up all the time, especially for the urban fringe developments, and so I'm asking kind of ahead of time, but thank you very much.
Anything else?
Fred Winger, and I would just say, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but if you're a homeowner there and you got to go put these in, they got to be a lot cheaper to put them in when you're putting the road in than to go back and have to add them in 10 years. And the development, I drove down there today and looked at this, the development is screaming down. It's going very fast that direction. I think there's some reasons why Aubrey didn't develop out the way it was supposed to, because some individuals put some stops to it being incorporated, right? So I think the pace of progress will be much more rapid in this area. Thank you.
All right, any other questions of staff? Thank you, Diane. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Thanks. If you want to provide any comments or information to report, thank you.
This is Perla with Kimley Horn, civil engineer, representing the applicant. And you guys had great questions about the things that I'll add on. So thanks, Diane, for sharing and reading that stipulation. So we received the stipulation about an hour before coming in here. So it didn't give us, enough time to have conversations with the client. So I think we did have our meeting with JCW last Tuesday, and that was the first time we heard about the potential sewers coming into this area. I believe there is a extension from the Blue River. I think the project is called Blue River 28, and it's under construction right now. There isn't records yet because it's under construction. So we were aware of this project until Tuesday of last week, and that's when we first heard about the potential sewers coming into this area. And so we talked to staff and JCW about the possibilities of continuing these conversations and what that means, what that looks like, and also for our client, for the developer. We did hear about adding some commentary about the future discussions. But my question, of course, we didn't have a lot of time to discuss, and kind of going back to maybe some of the comments is, since there's a lot of things to be ironed out and things that are still unknown, is there any way that this stipulation gets moved to the final plat instead of this preliminary plat?
Thank you for that. We will discuss that. Any other comments? Thank you, appreciate that. Do we have anyone here that wanted to speak on behalf of this application from public comment? Is there anyone online? All right, then we'll go ahead and close close the public comment section and have discussion among the board. And I'll ask staff a comment to respond to the comment the applicant had.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Penley, planning staff. Staff would recommend keeping this new stipulation as we are recommending it, just because it is a requirement of the regulations. As the applicant indicated, unfortunately, it was very short notice for the timing of this update, and we just received this update today as well from Johnson County Wastewater District. And it's based on just the review of this new sewer project in the area, and that's why I think the timing of it is unfortunate, but we know about it now. So we wanted to add that as a requirement because it is in the current zoning and subdivision regulations. When sanitary sewer is expected to be likely within the next 15 years, this is the current requirement. There are provisions for waivers, so I think there's still an option that this requirement could be waived completely. We just can't do that at this time. Actually, the zoning board would provide a recommendation on that, and the BOCC actually grants the waiver. But we're not actually presenting that. We're neither requiring it, nor are we recommending a waiver. We're just saying that this is the requirement, and those details need to be worked at the time of the final plat. We understand why the applicant has indicated that, but we just feel that it would be appropriate to keep this in just so that everyone is on notice for the requirement. We will certainly address it at the time of final plat. There's another option that may be possible following the zoning board's recommendation when this goes forward to the Board of County Commissioners. It's something that could probably be revised. I don't know if that would require going back to being remanded, but I think it's something that if it doesn't substantially change anything with the plat, and it's just a matter of the details of the stipulation, I think that could be revised, especially if their applicant is in agreement with that. That's another option. That's something that we'll discuss as well before this goes forward to the board. But staff would feel that it is appropriate to keep this just because, again, this is a current requirement.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pendley, has the Johnson County Wastewater District formally stated, so that if I ask you to produce some document from them, that their board has said, yes, we've looked at this and service is considered likely to be available to the subject property within the next 15 years?
Sean Penley, planning staff. I don't know. We did ask that the staff, or JCW staff, did provide a comment to this effect, and they just provided that today. I don't know how they handle it with a board. The chief engineer actually is the one that makes the recommendation on when sewers are likely to be available. Unfortunately, the chief engineer with Johnson County Wastewater was not available today, but other staff that work under the chief engineer did provide this. This is something that we could request an update to be provided from the chief engineer before this goes forward to the board. There is also the option too, if the applicant wants to consider this, certainly the board could recommend a continuance to the next meeting in March to work out this detail. If that would be satisfactory to the applicant, that's something that we can also consider. So it may be worth asking the applicant if they'd like to come back and speak to that. It would just delay this 1 month. It push this back to the next meeting in March. We could do that as well. That's another option.
If we did that, would we then be able to consider both the preliminary plat and the final plat at the same time?
I don't believe we can do that because the applicant has not yet filed the final plat, and you can't consider a simultaneous review of preliminary and final plat when you have over 7 lots, I believe. So it's large enough of a development where we have to do it separate anyway. That's okay. I don't think that would be a problem for the applicant on timing of the final plat. But it may be worth us asking the applicant to speak to the question, would they request a continuance for this to discuss that new stipulation?
Right, and I will present that here and she can answer if she knows. I guess my concern here is, I think it's appropriate to look at this from the developer's point of view, at least if they're being asked to expend considerable amount of money I would want more than it's likely we'll do it in 15 years, because we all know, anybody that's been around a long time knows, the promises, the extension of these sewers has been made, that's almost a mantra. Yeah, it'll be out there within 15 years, and 30 years later, we're still waiting to see the sewers. This one might be different because of the location, as you testified earlier, as to where that is, but I would want something, pretty definite from the sewer district that we have, that yes, the chief engineer says, we've looked at this is what we're going to do. It's in our, at least our 10-year plan out or whatever, so we aren't just saying, yeah, they think it's likely, developer spends all this money on it, it doesn't happen, and then there are questions about, what happens to that sewer. If I were the developer, I'd certainly be concerned about saying, well, look, since we don't know what's going to happen, and we know there's a history of it not coming up, if I'm going to put these in, it's on you, I'm done. If that sewer's in there, you take it as it is, and if you need to fix it in 15 years, it's on the sewer district. I have no idea what they do in that regard, but I would ask the applicant if they would be interested in us continuing this, but it would delay you another month to get back to the final plan. Oh, there you are.
We would like to keep it on schedule, so not continue it.
Okay. Let me ask you this then while you're up there. How concerned are you about this particular stipulation? I mean, you've talked to the sewer district, and we're just speculating up here about things, but what's your view on behalf of your client as to the concern of stipulation number 22?
Yeah, I think the concerns are similar to what you have mentioned. We're excited of their sewers, but I think this is sort of new to us and to our client as well. And so obviously it's the expense of putting in sewer. We did see a map about, what it would take to get the Blue River 28 contract project, which is about 3,700 feet east of our development. It would have to cross several properties to even get to our property. And then, of course, and that takes another process because it's a whole district that has to come, and that's a whole process. So it seems like there has to be time, and there's a lot of steps to it. And so putting in some sewers right now, or the dry sewers, was concerning because it wasn't a cost that was anticipated for our client.
And this is I kind of understanding that stipulation can be revised before the final plat. That way it gets recorded as, yes, that is what the regulations are in the county, but that because the final plat's not here, that gives us time to then alter or change that. Because I'll have to agree, we've got folks in that part of the county that can see the water tower, but don't have water to their house. But they can see it out their back door. And so when you look at distances of, well, it's just here, it'll be there fast. And I've been here 19 years, and every year it's always 15 years later. So 15 years ago, it was 15 years. 15 years later, it's still 15 years. So that 15 just is the new number every year. So I kind of agree with what Rod's indicating on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Please, Sean.
Penley, Planning Staff, if I could also elaborate again. So with the recommended stipulation, what this does allow, it allows that leeway. We're not saying again that dry sewers are required, excuse me, we're saying it's required. We're not saying they have to be installed yet. We don't know yet what JCW would agree to, and we don't know what any potential waivers are. We're just saying this is the requirement. You're correct, we still have that prerogative to change this at time of final plat. I think what I heard from JCW was, at a minimum, we just need to make sure that we have the proper drainage easements. That's the key. I think they would also agree, there are concerns with if dry sewers were installed that may not be appropriate or maybe long-term. They're in agreement with that. They just they also don't have the authority to say whether they have to be installed or not installed. It's kind of like staffs. We make a recommendation and the board decides. We're just saying, this is a requirement. We just want to make sure it's on record that that's the requirement. And unless a waiver is granted, this is the requirement. And those details will all be worked out at the final. So I don't think we're locking in either way with this. That's why I don't think it would be, we agree, it would probably make sense to keep this on schedule. And we could work out the details even maybe before BOCC. We just want to make sure it was on record and everyone was aware of that.
Understand.
This is Fred Wingert. The developer can request a waiver, you said, correct?
The developer can request a waiver as part of that final plat. That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson. So with that understanding, if we then include stipulation number 22 as written, it would be with the express intent, or at least if I make the motion on it, would be with the express intent that it is put there subject to whatever discussions take place between now and the next presentation to determine the reality of what this is, which would give the applicant a chance, if they didn't really like any of that, to withdraw or do whatever action they think appropriate to their.
Absolutely. The applicant has that prerogative at any point in the process, could withdraw, could continue, and could even request a change that would require a remand back to the zoning board if, possible, if absolutely, has to go back through everything. We could do any one of those options. That's correct.
Okay, and then the last point I would make is, I don't know, I haven't looked back, had no reason to look back to see what discussions have been had at the Board of County Commissioner level about what Article 31 actually requires. And you kind of discussed this, but I would hope that statement that the sewer service is likely is more than just an off-the-cuff opinion by the chief engineer, simply recognizing how many times that we've imposed that requirement on developers for these subdivisions, which are becoming more frequent now than they were in 1992 or whatever. Then for whatever reason, good reason, not saying it's anything nefarious, but they don't get extended. People refuse to create a sewer district or whatever the case may be. It just doesn't happen. So I would hope that, as the planning department, you might suggest to the BOCC that perhaps Article 31 deserves some consideration as to the level of certainty we need from the sewer district, that we as the zoning board members or any future zoning board members can see that would justify the decision that it's likely before we impose those kind of requirements on the developer, unless it's understood that, okay, if we put them in, it's on the sewer district after that, because it could be 25 years before anybody runs any sewage through those lines. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And this is and I also think what's important is not so much this application as I'm excited to see more single-family residents being developed here, and that this isn't a data center, this isn't a warehouse. But in the same way, we have the rural areas that potentially, we did the final plat of one that was over in Aubrey Township, over in the Stillwell area. That was very clear there's not going to be sewers over there anytime soon. But when it comes to this topic, this is going to be the repeat item of agenda as hopefully we get more and more of those single-family residents being developed. So I think that's why it's important to iron it out and have that precedent clear.
Certainly, and Sean Penley, planning staff, we talked about that with JCW staff as well. We would need a letter from the chief engineer, and to be honest, we probably would request to have a representative of JCW at that next meeting, whether for the BOCC or for the final plat or both. We agree, and they certainly will provide that. And there's more detail to explain how and why they consider it likely because of that new sanitary sewer project, as well as request and interest from surrounding property owners for future development. That's how they arrived at that decision, but certainly we could provide more information at the final plat stage.
Perfect, thank you.
I do have
And
one last question. Can
Please.
I add it? Okay. Perla Diosdado, Kimley Horn. We also didn't have enough time to read on Article 31, stated on the stipulation number 22. It does talk about, or it includes that unless a waiver is granted, I don't know if this is too extensive to ask here, but can you speak about the waiver?
Perfect, thank you for that question. Will staff respond, please?
Sure. So, so in Article 31, under this wastewater category 1, so I'm just going to read it. It might be just a little bit easier. So it says down a ways in here. So it says, however, if the chief engineer of the Johnson County Wastewater District considers it unlikely or unreasonable to expect that sanitary sewer service would be available within a 15-year period of time to a subdivision located within an area set forth, like it would be the urban fringe policy area, then the chief engineer may recommend to the BOCC that a waiver, either full or partial, be granted from the requirements set forth in the subsection. And so that's where it's talking about, so that's a waiver for if they think that the sewers will not be coming within 15 years. So then it goes on to say, so likewise, if the rural comprehensive plan identifies any portions of the county, or in particular those areas like urban fringe policy above to be non-sewerable, then the director of planning may recommend to the BOCC that a waiver be granted. I don't think that part really applies because we know it can be sewerable at some point. So then the final paragraph that talks about waiver says, additionally, if the chief engineer of Johnson County Wastewater District considers it advisable based upon specific facts and circumstances that are particular to a given subdivision to forego requiring the provision of sanitary sewers, dry low-pressure sewers, or dry gravity sewers, although the criteria designated above, which we talked about, through requiring such sewers have been satisfied, then the chief engineer may recommend to the BOCC that a waiver, either full or partial, be granted from the requirements set forth. For the purpose of this waiver, facts and circumstances particular to a given subdivision may include, but not limited to, 1, the platting of a 1 or 2 lot subdivision, or 2, the replatting or combining of several lots in a subdivision. So I think there's some opportunity there that that waiver could, that the chief engineer could maybe recommend a waiver. Just would have to provide some facts and reasons why.
Yeah, and thanks, Diane. Sean Penley, yeah, just to elaborate on that. So the applicant can certainly request a waiver. The chief engineer for Johnson County Wastewater will make their recommendation on that part of it, and then the board will make the final decision. Certainly, it seems like appropriate, as you mentioned. I think JCW, what they're going to say is that at the minimum, we just need to make sure we have easements. I don't think, we can't speculate what the final comments will be from the chief engineer, but I think it is still a possibility that the dry pressure sewers or low or gravity sewers are not required at this time, but it's something that is a requirement, and a waiver has to be granted if it's not done by the developer. I think that's the key. So we'll certainly have the details of that ready at the time of file plan.
Chair?
This is kind of, I appreciate that. Thank you, Diane. I think one of the things that that kind of interests me is this is going to get passed on to the homeowners that are trying to buy the lots. So if the developer has to increase the cost, and then we're adding the inability to kind of develop the single-family residence, it's going to make it harder, it's going to make it more expensive, and I think those added costs aren't necessary for a homeowner to absorb now for something that might happen 15, 20 years later. And so I kind of agree with Rod on some of the points and comments with that too. Sorry.
Yes, there is a Skylar Ford, he's representing the applicant as well, that has a question. Is that okay to?
Yes, please, thank you.
Go ahead, Skylar.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I just had a quick question about the stipulation that was added. Just the language says per Article 31 of Johnson County zoning and subdivision regulations, the preliminary plat is subject to dry sewer policy, which requires dry low pressure sewers or gravity sewers. I was curious where this development was meeting that criteria to trigger that. If we don't have an opinion of the chief engineer, I was curious where that was being met, just if that stipulation reads that it is required to follow the dry sewer policy, which requires the dry lower pressure sewers.
Thank you. Diane, Sean, Diane?
Yes, I can kind of start out here. So Article 31 is the article that has the minimum infrastructure requirements. And so you first go, so there's a chart, and so that chart has the zoning districts, and then it sets forth which categories of minimum infrastructure requirements are required. So that PRUR zoning district is required, the wastewater 1 category is required. And so when you go to that wastewater 1 category, so that category 1 states that if a subdivision contains any lots smaller than 7 acres in size and is located within the following, one of the following areas, and that's it talks about the Blue Valley area plan, 2 is the Lone Elm area plan, 3 is the urban fringe policy area. And so according to our policy area map of our rural comprehensive plan, the subject property is located in the urban fringe policy area. So those are the 2 criteria, I think, that kick it into the requirement. One is that the plat has lots that are less than 7 acres in size, and it is also located within the urban fringe policy area. So I think those are those two criteria in particular that set forth that requirement, for the dry sewers. So I don't know if that's enough detail to help answer that question.
Thank you.
I was going to say that Rod Richardson again. Let me ask you to go back to something you said earlier. Under this policy, does it require the chief engineer to make this determination that it is likely that sewers will be extended?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it says, however, if the chief engineer, Johnson County Wastewater District, considers it unlikely or unreasonable to expect sanitary service within 15 years. So that's, that determination that it's either, yes, there could be available in 15 years
Right.
or not, or more. But yes, it absolutely does designate chief engineer, JCW, making that determination.
Okay. Has that been determined by the chief engineer?
Sean Penley, planning staff. The chief engineer has not actually provided an official statement. However, the staff for Johnson County Wastewater did say it is likely, based on the projects going on, we could tell you that it is likely. What we rely on, though, of course, to make the final decision and to grant a waiver, the chief engineer has to provide that. Again, we're not making a recommendation on a waiver or a requirement. So it's kind of a timing issue. It's
Okay.
unfortunate.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the reason I say it is when I make this motion, I'm going to probably strike out the first sentence of this because the chief engineer has not in fact made that recommendation. He may, you're going to find that out for sure. But I think if that's what the article requires and that's what we're going to impose, then I'd want the chief engineer to be, to make that statement. And I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion if you're, you have any other comment?
We really haven't had discussion on the project other than sewers.
Yeah, what else do you have? Question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Good?
No, we're tracking with everything.
Fred Wingert, I really appreciate this development, the size of the lots. This is my feedback for, everyone involved is this is what we're trying to go for. It seems like development after development after development comes in just meeting our minimum acreage criteria, and this blows the acreage criteria away. And I think the goal that I hear from people that live in our area is this is the kind of development we want, not the ones that just barely meet the density. And I think this is a fabulous addition to the community. I think it'll be a place that people are going to want to move to. So I just wanted to add that to the record. And I love the sewer talk, but I understand, Rod, that the issues there, and I don't want to see an undue burden put on the developer. But it does seem like to me development is heading that way pretty fast. So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is Ken. I would agree with Fred's comments. Second point I want to just make is a matter of bookkeeping. This stipulation number is 22. We have a 22 stipulation. So if we remove 20, I expect that we're looking to renumber 21 and 22 as 20 and 21, making this then 22, just to make sure we're not having two 22 stipulations that can later create conflict.
Guys, that's why he's the chairman.
So we could either do that, or Rod, when you make the recommendation, just make this recommendation 20 to replace it. Might be even easier, just for clarification for bookkeeping. Any other conversation, comments? Any other questions from the applicant or staff? Want to be fair to everyone to have comments or
Or the gentleman on Zoom.
the gentleman on Zoom? Please. Yes, please. State your name and address, please.
Christian Sharash, I'm representing the den at Wolf Creek. I think when we mentioned the sewer, I just wanted to put my, not a lawyer or pretend to be in any form or fashion, but given the lack of official classification by the chief engineer, I think if we had this meeting yesterday versus today, we don't have this stipulation versus now we do have this stipulation. And given that it's a preliminary plot review that needs to be worked out before the final, I feel from our side and our working with wastewater and figuring out the sewer that by having this stipulation in there, it puts us a little bit behind the 8 ball in a negotiation we haven't even started. Delaying also puts us in a cost crunch that, as we mentioned before, everything kind of waterfalls down to the future of the homeowners, as well as the idea of not knowing the time, we're gonna have to go septic, and so they're gonna have the homeowners pay for septic and potentially sewer. And so it's a pretty, I think, material concern to the overall project. So I guess it's my request, if it's possible, to remove this stipulation, and we'll have a full-blown plan whenever we come to final plot.
And if you could share with me, are you with Kimball Horn or?
No, I represent the owner of the development.
Okay. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, we can have further discussion, but let me unless anyone has any objection, I'll put a motion on the floor and we can see where we go, acknowledging everybody's comments. I don't know, have we asked if there anybody else in the audience has any comments?
I think that's our last one.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, and so we've closed public comment, right? Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will move that the board approve application number E25-530-REZ and E25-531-PP and E25-532-PDP for rezoning and preliminary plat, serving as the preliminary development plan for a 13-lot residential subdivision to be known as the Den of Wolf Creek. Subject to the stipulations recommended by staff and for the reasons set forth in the staff report, and to delete stipulation number 20 and to add stipulation, which I'm going to call number 22, which is the one we've been talking about, but subject to a modification. And then I'll explain why. I would include the stipulation that staff has proposed, which we're calling number 22, but my motion strikes the first sentence of the proposed stipulation simply because we do not have a formal opinion of the chief engineer, which is required under Article 31. The rest of that stipulation as written, I'm proposing be in place because it states a policy. We can't ignore the fact that it is a policy. It's there, which requires dry, low pressure sewers or gravity sewers to be provided unless a waiver is granted. The details for sewer service and required drainage easements to be determined at the time of final plat review. So my motion is that we approve this subject to all of the stipulations, the removal of 20 and adding new 22 revised to eliminate the first sentence. And in support of the motion, I would state that we've had a lot of discussion, which really goes, and I hope the county commissioners take particular heed of this discussion because it's going to come up more and more, of imposing upon developers obligations based on an opinion, whether it's the chief engineer or somebody else, of something that's going to happen within 15 years, places a potentially significant burden on the developer and an even greater one, as the chairman pointed out, on the residents that may end up living here. And I think it's important to recognize that before those are imposed, it's critical that the water district, or the sewer district in this case, have genuine belief, not just a hope, but a genuine belief that these sewers will be extended and be able to verbalize why that belief is factually there. And I would also hope that the Board of County Commissioners recognizes when they're considering this that as a practical matter, if in fact there is a requirement to install such low pressure or gravity sewers, that those ought to then be dedicated to the sewer district, and they be required to take them so that the duty to maintain those is cast upon the sewer district, that essentially is requiring them to be installed, that they may sit there for 15 years or who knows how much longer, and create all kinds of potential maintenance problems and costs for those residents. So those are just my reasons for suggesting that this is, that we need to take the first sentence out of there until we have some genuine belief that they're actually going to be extended before we impose this on this developer. And secondly, hopefully, when these discussions occur that we'll hear about the next time around for the final plat, we'll have all these things successfully resolved. But as a practical matter, I hope the Board of County Commissioners understands that if this motion passes, we're expressing some skepticism of significance here about the rationality of requiring this sort of thing under a policy where, where it could be 10, 15 years out before anything's done, unless the burdens of that are placed on the sewer district rather than the residents. That's my commentary and motion.
Can we go ahead for the record and propose the specific motion, just so we can have that in the record starting there? Sure. Thanks.
And for the sake of clarity, Rod Richardson again, I move that the board approve application number E25-530-REZ E25-531 PP and E25-532 PDP for a rezoning and a preliminary plat, serving as a preliminary development plan for a 13-lot residential subdivision to be known as the Den at Wolf Creek, subject to the stipulations recommended by staff and for the reasons set forth in the staff report, and to delete stipulation number 20 and add new stipulation number 22, except amended to delete the first sentence, so that stipulation number 22 in my motion would read, per the Article 31 of the Johnson County Zoning and Subdivision Regulations, the preliminary plat is subject to dry sewer policy, which requires dry low-pressure sewers or gravity sewers to be provided by the developer unless a waiver is granted by the Board of County Commissioners in accordance with the regulations. The details for sewer service and required drainage easements shall be determined at the time of final plat approval.
Do we have a second?
Fred Winger, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing unanimous approval of the motion, this will go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Yes, so this will go to the Board of County Commissioners on March 12th, 9:30 a.m., County Administration Building here in this room.
Thank you. I believe that is the business before the board. Do we have any other business for discussion before the board? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Fred Winger, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned until next month. Sent you an email.